the Apex cards. And I have to tell you, and I hope I'm not oversharing here, but it just feels like each and every time we are subjected to these Apex cards. And it's not necessarily because of the action. The action is the same. The action is, you put these fights at the Apex, you put them in Austin, you put them in some random, where Paris, you put them in a fight night city, and the fights are the fights. And this is not taking anything away from the fighters. I do think, by the way, there's no doubt you are getting more spirited, San Diego spirited, inspired performances when the crowds are there, they're hyped, the product is hyped, the product is super hot right now. People are getting behind the UFC, and so you're seeing better performances. I think more, I don't know, I guess spirit is the best word, performances when they're outside of the Apex. But I was thinking, like, why does this bother you so much, and why do you feel soulless when you are subjected to these events? I mean, part of me feels like it's taking us back to 2020. Like 2021, all that stuff, like when things were super, super dark, grim, depressing. And it's the lone reminder left in sports. No one else is doing events at, a closed venue inside some sort of sound stage, whatever you want to call it. No, I mean, you turn on college football, there's 100,000 people. You turn on the NFL, there's 60,000 people. You turn on the baseball playoffs, there's 50,000 people. You turn on the NHL, the NBA, it's packed arenas all over the place. You turn on boxing, it's packed. You turn on pro wrestling, it's packed. Everything is packed. The lone empty arena vibe, if you will, I know there's like 100 people there or whatever, but the lone vibe left in sports, how ironic is it that the lone vibe left is for the product that was back first? Now, I'm not here to talk about why. We all know why. They're saving money. They're making money. We all know why. But I'm not even here to talk about that. When I watched those events, I was thinking, like, why does this bother me so much? This is not why we fell in love with the UFC. This is not why we fell in love with MMA. We fall in love because of the pageantry, the showmanship, the events, the lights, the glitz. If you don't need that stuff, if that stuff does nothing for you, if that stuff doesn't make your experience better, then God bless you. And I'm actually envious of you. If you don't need that, if you don't need the environment, if it doesn't make you a little more hyped, great. You're better than I. I watched that Bills game yesterday. It's so much more fun because they're at, the Chiefs Stadium. I think they changed their name. I was going to say Arrowhead. It's like GHAE or something. You get the point. The crowd in every sporting event, whether it's Man City, Liverpool, what a game that was, Bills, Chiefs, what a game that was. Tennessee, Alabama, Knicks, Bull. It doesn't matter. The crowd always helps, regardless of what side you're on. Shields against Marshall, Deontay Wilder against Helwani. It doesn't matter. And so if you don't need that, great. I need that. And I used to watch late at night. I had a TV in my room when I was in high school, and I used to watch ESPN2 kickboxing. And I even think Scott Coker was involved in these events. And I used to think when I would watch these events, like, who's watching this? And B, who's invested in this? And part of the problem with kickboxing, I think, throughout its time here in America was, like, we've never had a reason to be emotionally invested in these fighters, in these fights, in these events. Everyone looks the same. All the events look the same. There's hardly any people at these events. It all feels very uniform. It all feels very interchangeable. It's impossible to turn on and be like, oh, that dude's fighting? I know that guy. That's so-and-so. No, they all look the same. They're all wearing the same pants. They have the same kind of look. The events all look the same. And I was thinking, like, I used to think this all the time. I used to think, how could people get into this? It all looks the same. It all feels the same each and every time I turn it on. Late night WKA kickboxing. This is part of the problem. No one's been able to market the sport correctly. And when I watch these Apex events, I get the same feeling. Unless you're betting on it, or unless you're a friend or family, why are you tuning into this right now? On a Saturday night, when you have college football, when you've got baseball playoffs, when you've got all kinds of things, starting this week, you'll have the NHL, the NBA as well. What is the incentive to watch this? It doesn't feel hype. It doesn't feel big. It doesn't feel glamorous. It doesn't feel larger than life. It feels like 1997 kickboxing on ESPN2. Everyone's dressed the same. Everyone looks the same. It all feels very interchangeable. And this is a bummer. I didn't get into MMA. I didn't fall in love with MMA because everything looked the same. It all felt special. Of course, back in the day, there were only like 4 or 5 events, and then it grew to 12 or so, the 20-something or so, or the 40. And there's something to be said for too much of a good thing ain't a good thing. But still, we were able to stomach it because there were, they were going from Austin to Charlotte to Philly to Boston to San Diego to LA to Las Vegas. It was always a big crowd, an excited crowd, at least for the last, 10 or so years, whether it was overseas, Brazil, etc. It's not feeling that way. And the sooner they can get out of it, I think right now they're making money. I think they're hurting the product long-term by staying at the Apex. Right now, it's great. And they're cashing in those checks and ESPN doesn't seem to mind. But in the future, it will hurt them because I think the product will go down and will suffer because of this sort of, lazy mentality of just staying at the Apex. I don't get it. Nevertheless, my point is, so I'm going to start at a negative and I'm going to end at a positive here. Do not worry. For as uninspired and as sort of missing some sort of ingredient or two these Apex events are, the lone positive is that it makes events like this Saturdays feel that much bigger and that much more important, and it gets us that much more hype because we have had to sit, my friends, let's be honest, through some clunkers over the past month or so, some uninspired cards which were lacking in depth, and I'm being kind. You sit through those because you like the fighters, you like the sport, whatever, you're betting on it, I don't know, and then you get to this side of the bridge and you get to UFC 280. And when the UFC wants to put on a big-time event, they could put on a big-time event, and no one puts on a big-time event like them in the world of MMA right now, and it ain't even close. PFL could put on as many pay-per-views as they want. Bellator could put on their most stacked card. Nothing will compare to 280. Nothing in the sport can compare to 280. 280 is probably, right now, as far as a 5-pack of fights, I would say, no recency bias, pay-per-view-wise, probably the best offering that the UFC has given us this year. As far as a 5-pack of fights, there have been cards, you had Ngannou Gan and Figueiredo Moreno. There have been cards that have had 2, 3 great fights. To me, there's 5 great fights on this card. And so you sit through those uninspired, shallow Apex events, and then all of a sudden, as opposed to back in the day when there was banger after banger after banger, here it's like, all right, it's like a single, a bunt, a foul ball, and then you get to the home run. And the home run feels bigger as opposed to an inning where you're spraying hits all over the field. And so this feels bigger. I am hyped for 280. It feels important. It feels like the stakes are massive. And you know what's great about it? I would make a strong argument right now that the 3 best divisions in the UFC are 135, 155, 170. Those are the most interesting, the most stacked, the deepest divisions in the UFC. And what makes this card so damn great is that those are the 3 main divisions featured at the top of the bill. 135. Wow. I think it's the best division in the UFC. I think it's the most open division in the UFC. And you've got Aljamain Sterling, the champion of the 135-pound division, defending against TJ Dillashaw and all the baggage that he brings along with him. His last clear-cut dominant win, 2018, August of 2018, against one Cody Garbrandt. That's how long it has been. Of course, loses to Cejudo, has the 2-year suspension, undergoes multiple surgeries, comes back, close fight against Sanhagen, hasn't fought since then, hasn't been seen since then in a cage, and now he gets a title shot against Aljo, polarizing, on his worst day, and even this weekend, going back and forth with the Andrew Tate stuff, oh my God, giving me a headache. Listen, this is a big-time fight, and Sterling's on quite the roll, and he's shutting up a lot of naysayers as far as his fighting is concerned. That was a big-time performance over Peter Yan. What's so great about this might not even be the most intriguing 135-pound fight. You could make a very strong case that the Petr Yan versus Sugar Sean O'Malley fight is even more intriguing than the title fight. That's how good this card is. So here you have Petr Yan, perennial contender, former champion, all this stuff against, this mega star who's about to break through if he can win this fight and really become a big star. We all know about Sugar Sean. I don't need to tell you the story. That's on the card as well. So right now you've got the end of the Grand Prix, you've got the championship fight, and then you've got this potential number 1 contender fight, right? And there's a scenario where if Dillashaw wins and Yan wins, maybe they're fighting for the belt. I can't see them doing Yan Aljo 3 right off the bat, but crazier things have happened. So that's on the card. And those aren't the mains. Main, of course, 11 wins in a row, Charles Oliveira. Who could have saw this coming? He loses to Paul Felder some 4 years ago, now goes on an incredible run. And I'm not comfortable with saying if he wins this fight, he's the GOAT. But holy crap, who has had a run like this in arguably one of the best divisions, if not the best division in the UFC, against this type of talent? Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, Ferguson, Lee, Jared Gordon, Nick Lentz, David Tamor, Jim Miller, Christos Giagos, Clay Guida. The first couple guys that I mentioned, the first 5 or so, all on fire, all in their prime, all super tough outs, all except for Tony. He finishes in his 11-fight winning streak. 10 of them are via finish. Now he's become a star. Now anything he posts on social media explodes. 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 15,000 likes. Wow. Who saw this coming from Charles Oliveira, who started his UFC career a 500 fighter? He was just a 500 pedestrian fighter. Now he's become one of the biggest stars in the world, certainly one of the biggest stars out of Brazil, certainly one of the biggest stars in the UFC. So he's not defending his belt. He's fighting for the vacant title because he was, he was stripped. We know about what happened in May prior to the Gaethje fight. I would actually strongly argue that whole situation made him into a bigger star. It made him somewhat sympathetic, even though he was already a sympathetic figure, considering where he's been, where he's come from, what he's had to overcome. But this, I think, added to that. And I really think he's become an even bigger star as a result. Obviously, he didn't want that, but there was a silver lining, no doubt about it. Just look at the numbers. Just look on YouTube. Just look at the way people speak of him. They love this guy. And amazing, very rare that someone who doesn't speak English is able to connect with the audience here in America. It has worked for him. He doesn't need it. Very few guys, Anderson, Jose Aldo, you could probably count on less than, 5 fingers, the guys who have been able to break through. Even Khabib needed to start speaking a little bit to connect. Junior Dos Santos needed to speak a little bit to connect. Anderson never really needed it, although you can make the case that he probably would have been even more popular had he spoke English earlier. Same with Aldo. Charles, you never hear him speak English, and the people love him, and they connect with him, and they're by his side. And then on the flip side, you have Islam Makhachev, the protege of Khabib Nurmagomedov, who's on his own winning streak, 10 in a row, has never fought anyone close to Charles, but it sort of feels like UFC 223, where it's like, all right, this is the coronation. This is the moment where the baton gets passed off, and he's able to, live up to his expectations, fulfill his destiny as champ, and kind of take that, mantle from Khabib and go on this long run. Fascinating style matchup, 11 wins in a row versus 10, grappler versus jiu-jitsu specialist. Do they stay standing? How does Makhachev look in his first pay-per-view main event? How does Oliveira look? Does he get roughed up again? He's been taking some shots, even though he's able to rebound. I mean, what's better than this? Oh, by the way, also on the card, also at 55, Beneil Dariush, who was supposed to fight Makhachev, who has some sort of argument, I think, in his back pocket to be the number one contender if he wins against Mateusz Gamrot, former KSW lightweight and featherweight champion. This is, who has a huge win over Arman Tsarukyan, probably Islam's best win. These two guys battling to try to become the next number one contender. And you have the cloud that is Alexander Volkanovski just chilling over Abu Dhabi. If someone stumbles, if someone misses weight, you've got the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world just chilling, waiting to be tagged in. That's never happened. We've had backup fighters before. We've never had a number one pound-for-pound fighter put his ego to the side and say, yeah, I'll fly over there. I'll make weight. Oh, by the way, I just had surgery. I just had my cast removed. No problem. If any of these guys stumbles, I'll fight them on 24 hours notice, and then I'll defend, the 55 or 45 belt in Perth in February. That adds intrigue to the week as well. A lot of pressure on these two guys. You miss weight, you stumble, you miscalculate. Freaking Volk, the ultimate professional, guy who never misses, never stumbles, never screws up, is right there waiting like the boogeyman, eyes on you, waiting for you to mess up. So you have that whole situation. And oh, by the way, it's not the fifth fight on the pay-per-view, but to me, the fifth most intriguing fight, it's the headliner of the prelims. It's Belal Muhammad against Sean Brady, who I think is a future title contender, 15-0, has looked incredible, haven't seen him in a year, has stayed active with grappling against Belal, who's enjoyed a great run as of late, has the controversial fight against Leon Edwards, the eye poke. So he's a part of his narrative. He wins this fight. All of a sudden, he's in that conversation for the belt as well. Brady wins this fight. I think he's maybe 2 away. I mean, people aren't signing up to fight Sean Brady right now. So you have those fights, 5 of those. You got a Muhammad Mokaev on the prelims. You got a Manot Fiorot on the main card as well. But you talk about 5 fights with stakes, with implications. 2 title fights, top contender fights, rising stars. I mean, big stakes for Sean O'Malley, big stakes for Sean Brady, big gambles. So again, my point at the beginning was to say, as lifeless as those Apex cards feel, and I got to say, each and every week, they are harder and harder to watch. If you have no skin in the game, they are harder and harder to watch. And I don't blame anyone who says I'm going to skip it. And I think eventually that is going to hurt the product. They're not going to worry about it now, but down the line, you got to get out of there. I'm telling you, this is me looking out for my brothers in Las Vegas. You got to get out of there. It's not helping the product. This is not why people fall in love with sports. It's working now. You're cashing in those checks. You're not paying to go on the road. You're not paying for travel. Trust me, it will hurt you in the long run. I'm trying to help out. I'm trying. This is me giving you free. Doesn't matter. Those events right now, as annoying as they are, as uninteresting as they are, makes these Saturdays so great. Makes these Saturdays so special and reminds us why we love this so much. Big, important, massive implications. I can't wait.